For an entire month, my husband and daughter treated me like a ghost, so I decided to vanish for real. 5 years later, he phoned and invited me to our daughter's wedding. I went with no idea what lay ahead, but when he saw me standing there, his hands started to tremble, and I finally grasped the true power of walking away. Adam, did you hear that? A kind of strange humming sound. I was standing motionless in my own living room, my hand still reaching for the TV remote, as my 18-year-old daughter looked straight past me, asking her father if he'd heard a noise. She didn't ask me a question. She asked about me, as if I were a faulty kitchen appliance. Adam didn't bother to look up from his phone, just the old house groaning, sweetheart. The house groaning. That's what I had become after 22 years of marriage. Not Eleanor, not Mom. Not even a person worth a flicker of annoyance, just a sound in the walls, background interference, the groan of old pipes that everyone has learned to tune out. Before we get into the rest of the story, I want to say thank you for being here and listening to stories about discovering strength in the most difficult circumstances. If you believe that no one should ever be made to feel invisible in their own life, I'd be grateful if you subscribed. It costs nothing, and it helps these stories find their way to others who might need to hear them. Now, let's see how this unfolds. That was day 28 of what I had begun to call the vanishing. 28 straight days of being treated as if I didn't occupy space in my own home. 28 mornings where my bright greetings were met with a wall of performative silence. 28 evenings of walking in to find them already halfway through a takeout meal they hadn't thought to get for me. I had genuinely started checking my reflection in mirrors that week, pressing my hand against walls just to confirm my own solidity. I'd even Googled, can a person be dead and not realize it at 2 a.m. a few nights prior, which should tell you everything you need to know about my state of mind. The remote was on the coffee table right between them, just a foot and a half from where I stood. The second I reached for it, Chloe snatched it up, pulling it to her chest as if I were a thief trying to steal the family jewels. "We're in the middle of something," she said, her eyes glued to the screen. "I just need 5 minutes," I heard myself say, and I hated the weak, pleading tone my voice had adopted. "Just to see the evening news, 5 minutes." Chloe's gaze remained locked on the TV, where some reality TV personalities were engaged in a manufactured fight. It's getting to the best part. The best part. It was always the best part. Every single time I wanted to use the television that my salary helped pay for, in the house that my efforts helped maintain, I was always about to interrupt some unmissable, pivotal moment. I stood there for another second, my arm still awkwardly outstretched. Before I let it fall limply to my side, Adam and Chloe had already turned their full attention back to the show, their bodies angled just so, forming a closed-off unit. A fortress I couldn't breach, I turned and walked back toward the kitchen. My steps, the only sound on the hardwood floors I'd spent Saturday morning cleaning. The plates from their breakfast were still piled in the sink. The breakfast I hadn't been a part of because they'd gone out for waffles. Without a word, without so much as asking if I'd like to join them, I'd found the receipt on the kitchen counter when I came downstairs at 8:30. 2 orders of Belgian waffles, 2 lattes, 2 glasses of fresh squeezed orange juice. The timestamp was 7:15 a.m. They had intentionally left before I was even awake to avoid me. This wasn't a new phenomenon. The pattern had been escalating for weeks. Each slight was small enough on its own to be explained away, but when woven together, they formed a tapestry of exclusion that was impossible to deny. It began with little things, like conversations that would die the instant I walked into a room. Private jokes that I was never clued in on weekend plans made without my input. Then it grew more overt. The cheerful good morning I'd offer would be met with absolute silence. Adam would lift his newspaper the moment I started to speak, creating a literal paper wall between us. Chloe's eyes would slide right over me as if I were made of glass, even when I stood directly in her path to ask about school. I tried to find rationalizations. At first, Adam was under a lot of pressure at the firm. Chloe was a teenager, and teenagers are notoriously self-centered. It was just a phase, some intense father-daughter bonding moment that would eventually fade. But this was more than bonding. This was a targeted campaign of exclusion, methodical, unified, and deliberate. I opened the refrigerator to find something for my own dinner and saw it was almost bare. The groceries I'd bought just 3 days before were mostly gone. In their place were styrofoam takeout boxes and convenience foods I didn't recognize. They had been eating without me, shopping without me, essentially living without me, right in front of my eyes. My phone buzzed on the countertop. It was a text from my friend Sarah. "Coffee tomorrow? Still on?" I stared at her message, trying to recall when we had even made those plans. Was it yesterday? A week ago? The days had started to melt into one another, each a carbon copy of the last. Wake up, attempt to be seen, fail, go to sleep, repeat. I typed my reply. Yes, 10 a.m. at Maplewood Cafe. Her answer was immediate. Perfect, can't wait to catch up. It's been ages. Ages. Had it really been that long? I scrolled up through our text history. It had been 6 weeks since we'd last met for coffee. 6 weeks since I'd left my house for anything besides my part-time job at the university's rare books collection. 6 weeks since I'd done anything that wasn't a desperate attempt to make my own family acknowledge that I was alive. When had I let myself become this woman? This pleading, invisible figure haunting the edges of her own life? I shut the refrigerator door and my eyes landed on something I hadn't noticed before: Adam's briefcase, sitting by the back door, packed and ready for the morning. But it was Saturday. Adam never packed his briefcase for Monday on a Saturday. He was a man of strict routines, almost pathologically so. The briefcase was always packed on Sunday evening, right after the evening news, never before. A cold, sharp feeling pricked at the base of my neck. I walked toward it, telling myself I was just being nosy, not truly snooping. The leather was supple and expensive, perfectly maintained, just like Adam himself. Professional, polished, unflappable. A piece of paper was sticking out from the side pocket. I could just make out the formal letterhead of a law firm. My hand moved on its own, my brain lagging behind as I pulled the folded document free. Petition for dissolution of marriage. The header stared back at me in stark, official font. The paper was shaking in my hands, or maybe it was just my hands shaking. I couldn't distinguish between the two anymore. My eyes flew down the page, snagging on legal phrases that felt like they were rearranging my reality. Irretrievable breakdown, equitable distribution of marital assets, custody provisions. Custody provisions? For Chloe, who was 18 and legally an adult. Unless Adam was preemptively ensuring I'd have no claim to even holiday visits, making certain the vanishing would become legally binding and permanent. I flipped to the second page. Division of assets. Our house. The house we had chosen together, whose walls I had painted, whose garden I had planted and tended to every spring. It was listed as a marital asset to be retained by the petitioner, Adam. The house would be his. Our joint savings accounts, the ones I had meticulously managed for over 2 decades, were to be divided. Our retirement funds neatly calculated and split. My own small pension from the library was categorized and accounted for. Everything we had spent a lifetime building together was itemized on a cold, sterile list, as if we were dissolving a business, not ending a marriage, not ending a family, not closing the book on 22 years of a shared life. I turned to the last page. The signature line. Adam had already signed it. His name was written in that controlled, efficient script I had once found so commanding it was dated 3 days ago, Thursday. The very same day I had suggested we try the new sushi place for lunch. The same day he had walked past me in the hallway as if I were a coat rack. He'd already made his decision. He had already signed the papers. He had already ended our life together. This past month hadn't been about stress or a difficult phase. It had been about them waiting for me to snap, waiting for me to leave, creating an environment so unbearable that I would be the one to walk out the door. That way, he would never have to be the bad guy. A small sticky note was attached just below his signature. 3 words in Adam's handwriting. Your signature here. Not, I'm so sorry it has come to this. Not, we have to talk. Not even a blunt, I want a divorce. Just a simple instruction, as if I were a junior employee being let go, handed a severance package, and told where to sign. I stood there in my kitchen. The kitchen I had wiped down that very morning, in the home I had cared for, next to the family I had given 22 years of my life to, and I felt something fundamental inside me shift. It wasn't breaking, it was hardening. I was not going to sign those papers. Not tonight. And not like this. I folded the document with precise, steady hands and slipped it back into the briefcase, exactly as I had found it. Then I walked upstairs to our bedroom, pulled my old duffel bag from the back of the closet, and started to pack. 3 t-shirts, 2 pairs of comfortable jeans, a week's worth of underwear and socks, my toothbrush, my laptop, the small framed photo of Chloe as a baby that I kept on my nightstand. I took it not because I planned to keep it with me forever, but because I needed a reminder of her. Before she had learned to look right through me, I left a note on my pillow. It was short, simple, and gave them nothing. Gone for a while to think. Don't worry about me. E. Then I walked back downstairs, past the living room where Adam and Chloe were still engrossed in their show, neither of them looking up as I walked by. I opened the front door, stepped out into the cool evening air, and pulled it shut quietly behind me. They didn't hear it. They didn't notice. They wouldn't notice for hours. Maybe not even until the morning when they realized they needed something from me. By then, I'd be long gone. Not because they had won, but because I had finally understood the rules of their game. You can't force people to see you. You can only choose to stop letting them make you invisible. I drove to the train station and bought a one-way ticket north to Oak Creek, my hometown, to the house I grew up in. The next train wasn't until 3:30 a.m. I had 4 hours to wait. I didn't weep. I didn't have a panic attack. I didn't call Adam. I didn't text Chloe. I just sat on a hard metal bench under the buzzing fluorescent lights of the station, and for the first time in a month, I felt like I could actually breathe. The train rolled into Oak Creek Station at 6:47 a.m., just as a pale sunrise began to bleed into the gray, overcast sky. I'd spent the entire 4-hour journey staring into the darkness, watching the reflection of a woman I barely recognized in the window. A hollow-eyed ghost with a duffel bag, running from a life that had already run away from her. My parents' house was just 3 blocks from the station, the same 2-story colonial I'd grown up in, where the walls of my old bedroom probably still bore the pinprick scars from posters of bands I'd long forgotten. I walked, my bag seeming to get heavier with each step, not from its physical weight, but from the weight of what it symbolized 44 years old, and I was running back home like a failed college student. The porch light was still on. That was Dad's rule. It never went off until the sun was fully up. I stood on the welcome mat for a full minute, my hand hovering over the doorbell, trying to rehearse an explanation that didn't sound utterly pathetic. My father answered the door in his ancient blue terry cloth bathrobe, the one Mom had been trying to throw out for the last decade. His hair was sticking up in gravity-defying tufts, and he squinted at me over glasses he'd clearly just jammed onto his face. Eleanor. His voice was thick with sleep and confusion. "What on earth are you doing here at this hour?" I just held up my duffel bag. It was the only answer I could give without my voice shattering, "Come in, come in." He stepped back, guiding me into the familiar living room, a space that hadn't fundamentally changed since 1995. The same floral sofa Mom had reupholstered herself, twice the same gallery of family photos on the mantelpiece, the same safe, predictable haven where the biggest disaster was a spilled glass of juice or a bad grade on a history test. "Harold?" Mom's voice floated down from the top of the stairs, instantly alert. Retired elementary school principals, I've learned, never lose their ability to sense trouble. Who's at the door at this ungodly hour? It's Eleanor, Dad called back. She's visiting. There was a pause, a long one. I could almost hear the gears in Mom's brain turning, processing the data. Eleanor unannounced at dawn with a duffel bag. I'll be right down. Dad led me to the sofa, took my bag from my hand, and set it by the staircase. I'll put on some coffee, he said, which was his go-to solution for any and all crises. Heart attack? Coffee? Fender bender? Coffee. Daughter arriving on your doorstep, clearly fleeing her marriage? Definitely coffee. I sank into that floral sofa and felt something tight in my chest finally begin to loosen. My hands were shaking, not from the cold or from fear, but from the simple, profound act of someone opening a door for me. Someone had said my name and looked directly at me as they said it. They've been pretending I don't exist, I said the moment Dad returned from the kitchen, not even bothering with a preamble. Adam and Chloe, for a whole month. Like I'm a piece of furniture, like I'm... My voice cracked. Like I'm the house groaning. My dad's expression shifted through a rapid series of emotions, confusion, then dawning comprehension, and finally a quiet, dangerous rage. The kind of anger that doesn't shout but smolders. He'd been an accountant for 40 years, a man who solved problems with spreadsheets and logic, but in that moment he looked like he wanted to solve Adam with his fists. How long? He asked, his voice low. 30 days. I was counting. He nodded slowly, absorbing it. And you left. I found divorce papers. He'd already signed them, left them for me to find with a sticky note telling me where to sign. That son of a... He cut himself off, glancing toward the stairs as Mom's footsteps descended. That's not how you end 22 years of marriage. Apparently, it is now. Mom appeared in the doorway, wrapped in her quilted robe, her gray hair in the neat braid she'd slept in for as long as I could remember. She looked from me to Dad and back to me, and I saw her retired principal assessment mode click on. I'll make some breakfast, she said. Eleanor, you look like you haven't eaten in a week, Harold. Set the table. That was my mom, managing a crisis through routine and nourishment. 20 minutes later, I was seated at their kitchen table, the very table where I had done my homework, endured family dinners, and announced my engagement to Adam over 2 decades ago. Mom placed a plate in front of me piled with scrambled eggs, toast, and slices of fresh fruit. She poured coffee, sat down opposite me, and delivered her verdict with the same clear-eyed honesty she'd once used on struggling third graders. You've been disappearing for years, Eleanor, haven't you? This isn't just about the last month. I opened my mouth to argue, to defend myself, but she held up a hand. Your Christmas letters used to be full of your life, Ellie. Little stories about Chloe. Funny things Adam said, what you were reading. For the last 5 years, they've been nothing but a generic store-bought card with your name signed at the bottom. When we talk on the phone, your voice is flat. You stopped talking about your own wants or interests. Everything became Adam thinks or Chloe needs. Each word landed like a small, hard stone, building a wall of truth I couldn't dismantle. You let yourself become the wallpaper, honey, Mom said, her voice softening but not losing its sharp edge, and eventually, wallpaper just gets painted over. The truth of it hurt more than any of Adam's calculated cruelties. She was right. I had been slowly erasing myself for years, making myself smaller, quieter, more accommodating, thinking that was what a good wife and mother was supposed to do. By the time Adam and Chloe began their active campaign, I had already done most of the heavy lifting for them. I don't want you to sign those divorce papers, Mom continued, her tone firm. Not yet. Not until you've figured out what you actually want, not just what Adam wants you to do. And you're staying here for at least 3 months. No making life-altering decisions from a place of pain. Mom, I can't just stay for 3 months. I have a job, You have a part-time library position that will grant you personal leave. What else do you have right now, Eleanor? Really? I stared down at my plate, the eggs suddenly looking like a mountain I couldn't climb. What did I have? A house I would be lucky to get half of, a daughter who referred to me as a strange noise, a husband who preferred me not to exist. 3 months, Mom repeated. Promise me. Okay, I whispered. 3 months. Dad reached over and squeezed my hand. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I was in a place where people actually saw me, even if what they saw came with uncomfortable truths. The next evening, I was helping Mom untangle a mess of garden hoses in the shed when a car pulled into the driveway. I didn't recognize the silver sedan until my younger brother, Leo, climbed out, holding bags of Chinese takeout. Mom called you, I stated. It wasn't a question. Mom called me, he confirmed, walking over and wrapping me in a hug that smelled faintly of sawdust and wood varnish. Drove 3 hours. You're welcome. Leo was 40, a high school shop teacher who had been through his own messy divorce a few years back. We sat on the back porch steps balancing containers of lo mein and sweet and sour pork as the spring evening cooled around us. Want to hear about my marriage? Leo asked, poking at a piece of chicken with a plastic fork. Not really. Too bad. You need to hear this. He set his container down. My ex-wife, for the last 5 years we were together, made me feel like my job wasn't a real job, like I was just playing with wood while she was building a real career. My hobbies were a waste of time. My friends were juvenile. My opinions were unsophisticated. I kept making myself smaller and smaller to avoid a fight. By the end, there was nothing left of me to shrink. I recognized the pattern instantly. You know what I finally learned? He went on. The person who makes you feel invisible is showing you, in the clearest possible terms, how much you matter to them. Believe them the first time. Don't waste years trying to prove your value to someone who has already decided you have none. So I should just give up on my marriage? I'm not saying that. I'm saying maybe you're not running away from your marriage. Maybe you're finally running toward yourself. He pulled a small, dog-eared notebook from his jacket pocket, the kind he used for furniture sketches, and drew a simple line across the page. Who was Eleanor before she met Adam? What did she love? What made her laugh? What were her dreams? I stared at the blank timeline, a hollow feeling spreading through my chest I couldn't remember. That version of me had been so completely subsumed that I couldn't even recall her silhouette. 3 months, Leo said, tapping the notebook. Mom told me the deal. Use this time to find her again. The Eleanor from before. See if she's someone worth being. After Leo left, I went up to my childhood bedroom. Mom had converted it into a guest room, but my old bookshelf was still in the corner, packed with the novels I had devoured as a teenager. Books I had read before Adam, before Chloe, before I became someone whose very existence was up for debate. My phone sat on the nightstand, dark and silent. It had been silent for a full 7 days now. No frantic calls from Adam demanding to know where I was. No worried texts from Chloe asking if I was okay. Nothing. A part of me had secretly expected rage, a barrage of furious messages demanding I come home and stop being so dramatic. A part of me had hoped for concern, for calls asking if I was safe. What I got was silence. They either genuinely didn't care that I was gone, or worse, they were relieved. I cycled through a storm of emotions faster than I could name them, white-hot rage at their chilling indifference. A deep, bottomless grief for the marriage I had lost, shame that I had allowed myself to become so diminished, and a paralyzing fear of a future where I didn't even know who I was supposed to be. That night, I woke up at 3 a.m., my heart hammering against my ribs, convinced I had made a terrible, life-ruining mistake. I should go back. I should apologize for leaving. I should just sign the papers and accept whatever scraps of a relationship they were willing to give me. But then, I pictured Adam walking past me as if I were a coat stand. I heard Chloe's voice asking her father if he'd heard a strange humming sound. I saw the empty refrigerator they had left for me. I could leave that way deliberately. Each memory was like a brick, building a wall of resolve in my chest, transforming my grief into something harder, something more durable. By the end of that first week, something began to shift. I woke up on Saturday morning at 9:30, the latest I'd slept in over a decade, without an alarm clock, without a shred of guilt, without the weight of anyone needing anything from me. I made myself coffee, taking my time. I sat in Mom's garden with a novel I'd been meaning to read for a year for 3 solid, uninterrupted hours. I just read. Because I wanted to. It was such a minuscule thing, but it felt like remembering how to breathe. That simple act, 3 hours of reading just for myself, became my anchor. Every morning, I would wake up naturally, make coffee, and sit in the garden with a book. No one was waiting for me to perform some invisible domestic labor. No one was timing how long I took for myself. It should have felt selfish, but instead, it felt like remembering I was a person. 3 weeks into my stay, Dad asked if I'd mind updating my resume on his computer. "Just in case you feel like looking for something full-time," he said, his tone casual, not pushing, just opening a door. I sat at his old desk in the study, a room that still smelled faintly of the pipe tobacco he'd given up a decade ago. The computer was a relic, but it worked. I opened a web browser to log into my email and find my old resume files. That's when I saw it. My personal email account was still logged in from a visit months before. The inbox was mostly junk, but one subject line made my hand freeze on the mouse. Follow-up on our discussion regarding Chloe's college applications and the special circumstances you mentioned. The sender was a Ms. Albright, Chloe's high school guidance counselor. Special circumstances? What special circumstances? I knew I shouldn't open it. I knew, even as my cursor hovered over the message, that this was snooping, reading correspondence that wasn't intended for me. But that phrase, special circumstances regarding my own daughter, overrode every instinct for privacy. I clicked. The email was part of a longer chain. I scrolled to the very beginning, my heart starting to pound with each message I read. 6 months ago, Adam had reached out to Ms. Albright. The first email was harmless enough. Questions about the timeline for college applications, scholarship opportunities, standard parental inquiries. But the second email changed everything. I wanted to touch on some family matters that might impact Chloe's applications. Adam had written, "My wife has been struggling with some personal challenges lately, mental health issues that have made her increasingly erratic. I'm doing my best to provide a stable environment for Chloe through her senior year, but Eleanor's condition has been a strain on the household. Mental health issues, increasingly erratic, Eleanor's condition." My hands began to shake violently. The email thread documented how Adam had, over a period of months, methodically constructed a false narrative. Each email added another brick to the wall. Eleanor was battling depression. She was having trouble with daily routines. She was becoming emotionally withdrawn from her family. He painted himself as the heroic, long-suffering husband, juggling a demanding career and his daughter's needs while his wife slowly fell apart. Ms. Albright's replies were full of sympathy and support. She praised Adam for his dedication. She offered resources for families coping with mental illness. She assured him that a note could be added to Chloe's college applications about the challenging home environment. To explain any potential dips in her performance, I kept scrolling, each new message making me feel physically ill. There was no challenging home environment. There was no mental breakdown. There was only Adam, systematically assassinating my character to our daughter's school, creating a paper trail that portrayed me as unstable, unreliable, and unfit. And he had started this 6 months ago. 2 months before the vanishing had even begun. This wasn't a reaction to a problem. This was a premeditated attack. I printed out every single email, my hands trembling so badly I could barely feed the paper into the printer. Then, I did something I hadn't done since I left. I logged into our joint bank account. I had handled our finances for 22 years. I knew every account, every password, every automatic bill payment. I had managed it all while working my part-time library job, stretching Adam's corporate salary and my modest income to cover the mortgage, the bills, Chloe's tuition, everything the login screen appeared. I typed in the password, half expecting it to be rejected. Surely he would have changed it after I left. But it worked. He hadn't even bothered. Why would he? In his mind, I was already gone. The account summary loaded, and my stomach plummeted. The balance was $3,847. 3 months ago, it had been over $31,000. I clicked on the transaction history and watched our life savings bleed away in a clear, undeniable pattern of transfers. It started small, $200 here and there, to an account number I didn't recognize, then $500, then $1,000. The transfers had been happening for 8 months, always to the same external account, a Whitmore, personal savings. Adam had opened a secret separate account in his name only and had been systematically siphoning our shared money into it. I did a quick, frantic calculation. Over 8 months, he had moved nearly $28,000. The caterer for Chloe's 18th birthday party, $2,300, paid from our joint funds a week before a $3,000 transfer went to his personal account. The expensive client dinners I was never invited to, all paid for with our money, with equivalent amounts moved to his private stash just days later. He had been intentionally draining our shared resources while building his own financial fortress, ensuring that when I finally left, I would be left with next to nothing. The timeline was irrefutable. The money transfers began 8 months ago. The emails to the guidance counselor started 6 months ago. The systematic silent treatment began 4 months ago. The divorce papers were drawn up 3 weeks ago. This wasn't a marriage falling apart. This was a planned demolition. My phone rang, making me jump. The name on the screen was Diane, my supervisor from the university library. "Eleanor," she said, her voice cautious and uncomfortable. "I need to tell you something, and please don't shoot the messenger." "What is it, Diane?" "Adam called the library yesterday. He said you were going through some personal difficulties and would need an extended leave of absence for health reasons." Diane paused. "He implied, without explicitly saying so, that you were having some sort of breakdown. He even suggested that we might want to reconsider your position for long-term planning." The room seemed to tilt on its axis. "He what?" "I thought it was odd. You've worked with us for 12 years, Eleanor. You've never missed a shift. Never been late with a project, never given me any reason to think you were anything but completely stable. So I'm calling you directly to check. Are you okay? Is there something going on?" "I'm fine, Diane. I'm more than fine." My voice was steadier than I felt. "Adam and I are separating. I am not having a breakdown, and I have every intention of returning to work as soon as I am able." "That's what I thought." Diane's tone shifted, becoming sharp and direct. "Eleanor, I've seen this script before. My own sister went through something like this. Her ex-husband tried to sabotage her professionally right before he filed for divorce, building a case that she was unreliable so he could argue for full custody and reduce spousal support. I'm telling you what Adam is doing because this feels like someone building a case." After I hung up, I just sat there, staring at the computer screen, at the printed emails, at the bank statement spread across Dad's desk. The pieces were no longer just clicking into place. They were forming a horrifying mosaic. Adam had been planning my removal for at least 8 months. He had been moving money, fabricating a story about my mental instability, poisoning my relationship with Chloe, and contacting my employer to damage my professional standing. Then he created an intolerable living situation to force me to leave, giving him the final piece of his puzzle, proof of abandonment. If this ever went to court, what would a judge see? A mother who had walked out on her family without a word. A mother with no financial resources because she was supposedly too unstable to notice her husband draining their accounts. A mother whose own daughter's school had records of her supposed mental health struggles. A mother whose employer had been warned she might be too unstable to hold a job. Adam would get everything. The house, primary custody of Chloe despite her age, and minimal alimony because I was technically employable but had abandoned my responsibilities. I would be left with absolutely nothing. No home, no money, no credibility, no daughter, no reputation. I heard the back door open and shut. It was Leo, arriving for his now daily check-in, another bag of takeout in his hand. He found me in the study, surrounded by the paper evidence of my husband's systematic campaign to destroy my life. "Ellie, you okay?" He put the food down and came closer, his eyes taking in my pale face. "What happened?" I showed him everything. The emails, the bank statements. I told him about Diane's phone call. I watched my brother's expression morph from concern to a cold, calculated anger. Leo had always been the artistic one, the dreamer who taught kids about perspective and form. But in that moment, his mind was working like an engineer's, arranging facts into a logical sequence. He pulled out his notebook and started a new timeline, his neat teacher's handwriting marking down the dates and events. 8 months ago, money transfers start. 6 months ago, emails to counselor start. 4 months ago, the great silencing begins. 3 weeks ago, divorce papers appear. He drew lines connecting the dots and then looked up at me. "This isn't just cruelty, Ellie. This is a strategy, a scorched earth strategy." He tapped his pen on the timeline. "He created conditions so unbearable that you had no choice but to leave. Then he'd have proof of abandonment on top of a pre-built narrative that you're unstable. In any legal dispute over finances or custody, he would crush you. I had thought Adam was just cruel. I'd thought he had fallen out of love with me and was handling it like a coward. But this was something else entirely. This was a man dismantling his wife's existence with the detached efficiency of a corporate takeover, making sure she would be left with nothing. He was building a case, brick by painstaking brick, that would justify him taking everything while making it look like I was the one who had walked away. "What do?" I asked Leo, my voice a hollow whisper. He looked at me, and his expression was one I'd never seen on my gentle, artistic brother's face. It was the look of a survivor. "You don't sign those papers," he said. "You document everything. You build your own case. And you find a lawyer who eats men like Adam for breakfast because your husband just made a huge mistake." "What mistake?" "He assumed you'd never figure it out," Leo said, a thin, sharp smile on his face. "He assumed you'd just stay broken. He forgot that invisible women see everything." Leo's words echoed in the quiet study. He forgot that invisible women see everything. I looked down at the mountain of evidence on my father's desk. The printed emails, the bank statements, the notes from Diane's call. 8 months of calculated destruction, all laid out and undeniable. "I'm not signing those papers," I said, the words solidifying the decision as I spoke them. Leo nodded, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. "Good. What's next? I'm not contacting Adam at all. No phone calls, no angry emails, no confrontation, nothing." The plan was taking shape in my mind as I spoke, each piece falling into place with a sudden, startling clarity. "He thinks I'm broken. He thinks I've run off to have a nervous breakdown somewhere. Let him think that." "You're going dark," Leo said, understanding immediately. "Healing up while he gets cocky." "Exactly," I said, gathering the documents into a neat pile. "Cocky people get sloppy. I need him to think he's already won." That evening, I opened a new bank account at a local credit union, one with no ties to our old bank. I transferred the meager balance from my personal savings, money from my library paychecks that Adam hadn't been able to touch. It wasn't much, but it was mine. My dad came into the study, his reading glasses perched on his nose. "You're documenting all this?" "Everything," I confirmed. He sat down and pulled the bank statements toward him with the methodical focus of a man who'd spent 40 years making numbers make sense. Numbers tell a story, he said. Let me show you something. For the next hour, my retired accountant father walked me through exactly how Adam had structured the transfers and how we could present it as a pattern of deliberate financial abuse. He was clever about it, Dad admitted, his voice tight with grudging respect. Small amounts, irregular intervals, nothing to trigger a fraud alert, but he made one big mistake. What? He left a trail, a pattern, and courts hate patterns. They imply intent. Dad started a spreadsheet logging every single transfer by date and amount. We need copies of all of it, he said. Bank records, the emails, a written statement about the call to your employer. We build a timeline that screams premeditation. Mom came in with a tray of tea, her expression one of quiet resolve. I called Margaret Chin, she announced. She retired from Lincoln High 3 years ago, but she remembers you from when you volunteered in Chloe's second-grade classroom. Mom set the tea down with determination. She's writing you a character reference. So are Beth Garrison and Tom Fletcher, all people who knew you as a parent, as a volunteer, as a stable, present member of the community. I looked at my parents, both in their 70s, both supposed to be enjoying a quiet retirement, now mobilizing their life's expertise to help their daughter fight a predator in a bespoke suit. Thank you, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Don't thank us, Mom said, her voice firm. You're our daughter. We protect our own. 6 weeks after I had shown up on their doorstep with nothing but a duffel bag and a shattered sense of self, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail, assuming it was Adam calling from a blocked number again. But something made me answer. Eleanor Whitmore? The voice was female, professional, and warm-speaking. This is Dr. Evelyn Reed. I'm the director of the Maplewood Library System. Diane Brennan gave me your number. Do you have a moment? I moved to the back porch, away from the sounds of Mom making dinner. Of course. Diane speaks very highly of you. 12 years at the university, your work on the digital cataloging system, your community outreach programs. It's impressive. I could hear papers rustling on her end. We have an opening for a senior research librarian. It's a step up from your current role, better salary, full benefits. The job is yours if you want it. I gripped the phone, my knuckles white. Just like that? Not quite. Dr. Reed's voice softened. Diane told me a little bit about your situation. I went through a very similar divorce 5 years ago. A husband who tried to paint me as unstable to sabotage my career. I know what it looks like when someone is being professionally targeted, I see. You are too good at what you do to let him take that from you, Eleanor. This is a fresh start in a new city, a place where his version of the story doesn't exist, a place where you can rebuild without having to fight his narrative at every turn. She paused. The position starts in 3 weeks. Is that enough time for you to relocate? 3 weeks? Enough time to find a small apartment, pack the few things I owned, and leave behind the town where I had been Mrs. Adam Whitmore for 2 decades. Yes, I said, my voice clear and steady. That's plenty of time. Excellent. I'll email the formal offer right away. Welcome to Maplewood, Eleanor. After I hung up, I sat on the porch steps watching the sun dip below the horizon of Mom's garden. For the first time since I'd found those divorce papers, I felt something other than pain or rage or fear. I felt a flicker of hope. 2 months into my strategic silence, Chloe finally called not my parents' landline, but my cell phone, the number she'd always had. I stared at her name on the screen for 3 full rings before I could bring myself to answer Mom. Her voice was different, sharper, more entitled. Where are you? I'm safe, Chloe. I'm fine. Dad says you're having some kind of breakdown that you just left. I'm not having a breakdown, I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. I left because I was being treated like I didn't exist in my own house. There's a big difference. That's not. Mom, I need you to come back. My college applications are due, and I need your signature on the financial aid forms. This is really important. Not, I miss you. Not, are you okay? Not, I'm sorry, just, I need your signature. Then I heard it. a muffled voice in the background, but unmistakably Adams tell her she's being selfish, tell her she's ruining your future. My daughter wasn't calling out of concern. She was performing for an audience of one, something inside my chest, the last soft, vulnerable place hardened into steel. "Chloe," I said, my voice quiet but firm, "I'm not having a breakdown, I'm having a breakthrough. When you're ready to have a real conversation about why I left, one where your father isn't feeding you lines, you know how to reach me, Mom. Wait." I ended the call. My hands were shaking, but my resolve had never been stronger. Leo, who had stayed for dinner, appeared in the doorway he'd clearly overheard. He crossed the room and put a hand on my shoulder. "That was perfect," he said softly. "Don't let them drag you back into their drama." She didn't even ask if I was okay. "I know," his voice was gentle, "because she's been told you're not okay. She's been fed a story for months, Ellie. It's going to take her a long time to question it. If she ever does." "If she ever does," Leo agreed. "But you can't set yourself on fire to keep her warm. You gave her 22 years. Now it's time to give yourself a chance." 3 weeks later, I stood in my new apartment in Maplewood. It was a one-bedroom with a functional kitchen and a living room that got the afternoon sun. The furniture was all from a thrift store, but it was clean. The plates were mismatched, but they were mine. The space was small, but it was entirely my own. My first night, I sat on my secondhand sofa with a container of Chinese takeout and had a profound realization. I was content. Not happy, not yet. That would take time. But I was content in a way I hadn't been in years, maybe decades. No one knew where I was except my parents and Leo. No one could walk past me like I was a piece of furniture. No one could talk about me as if I were a malfunctioning appliance. I found a yoga studio down the street and joined an evening class taught by an instructor with laugh lines and gray hair who called everyone dear. I discovered a book club at my new library. I made friends with my next-door neighbor, Elena, a teacher recovering from her own bad divorce who invited me on morning walks. My routine became my salvation. Waking up without an alarm, working in a place where my expertise was valued, evenings that were entirely my own weekends spent at farmers markets and exploring hiking trails. I learned that I liked red wine more than white, that I preferred thrillers to romance novels, and that sleeping in on a Sunday without a cloud of guilt was the purest form of luxury. 3 months turned into 6. 6 months became a year. The seasons changed and I changed with them. Not in a sudden, dramatic way, but slowly, steadily. Like a plant that was finally getting enough sunlight, I wasn't just surviving Adam's demolition. I was excavating the person I had been before I became Mrs. Whitmore, before I had learned to make myself small and quiet and convenient. I was finding the woman who had once laughed so hard she'd spilled coffee on a cute guy at a conference. The woman who made up ridiculous slogans for imaginary products just to make herself laugh. The woman who believed she had a right to take up space in the world. She had been there all along, buried under 2 decades of being systematically diminished. Now, she was finally emerging, and she was stronger than Adam could have ever imagined. Because he had made one fundamental miscalculation. He thought that by erasing me, he would make me disappear. Instead, he had set me free. Freedom, I discovered, wasn't a single grand moment. It was an accumulation of 5 years of small choices, each one building on the last until you looked back and barely recognized the person you used to be. Year 1 was about survival. Learning to sleep in an empty bed without feeling lonely, to cook for one without seeing the ghosts of 2 empty chairs, to make decisions that only affected me. I enrolled in night classes at Maplewood University, finally pursuing the master's degree in library science I'd abandoned. When I got married, Adam had called it a frivolous expense back then, implying my education was less important than the family's needs. It turned out it wasn't frivolous at all. I dove into digital archiving, information management, and emerging library technologies. The work was demanding in a way that was purely intellectual. a welcome relief from the emotional survival of the past year. My thesis on digital preservation strategies for small community archives was published in the Journal of Library Administration. In year 3, Dr. Reed celebrated by bringing a bottle of cheap champagne to the office. "You're too good for this to just be a job," she told me over plastic cups. "I'm promoting you to associate director. More money, more responsibility. Are you ready for that?" I was. I turned out to be good at leadership. I mentored younger librarians, redesigned outdated systems, and fought for budget increases. My colleagues sought my opinion and invited me to dinner. They actually seemed to enjoy my company. It was a revolutionary feeling, being valued for my mind instead of my ability to be convenient. Elena, my neighbor, introduced me to her book club in year 2. That's where I met Joyce, a real estate agent with a cackling laugh, and Michelle, an ER nurse whose gallows humor about her own ex-husband made me snort wine out my nose. We started meeting on our own once a month, just the 4 of us, calling ourselves the Hearth Circle. With only a little irony, women who had rebuilt from the ashes. "My ex used to tell me I was too loud," Joyce said one night, deep into her 3rd glass of wine. "I spent 15 years trying to be quieter." "You know what I realized?" "What?" Michelle asked. "I'm not too loud. He was just too fragile. We all drank to that. I dated here and there. Nothing serious. It was more about reminding myself that I was still a woman, still interesting to other people. There was Daniel, a history professor who took me to art museums, and Mark, a fellow librarian who made me laugh but wanted a level of commitment I wasn't ready for. I wasn't looking for a new relationship. I was still learning how to be in one with myself. Throughout it all, I maintained a complete and total silence with Adam and Chloe. No calls, no emails, no late-night dives into social media to see what their lives looked like without me. I blocked them on every platform, creating a digital firewall between my past and my present. It wasn't avoidance, it was strategy. My lawyer, Laura Vance, had advised it from the start. Laura was a woman in her 50s with razor-sharp intelligence and a reputation for dismantling aggressive legal teams with unshakable professional calm. "Let him think he won," she'd told me in our first meeting. "Let him get comfortable. Comfortable men get sloppy." So I let Adam believe his erasure had worked. I paid the court-ordered child support every single month without fail, $400 that I could have legally contested. But I paid it anyway, building my own paper trail of stability and reliability. I kept copies of everything: bank statements showing steady income, employment records showing promotions, character references from colleagues, building a counter-narrative we might never need but would have ready. My parents gave me occasional, brief updates on Chloe. She'd gone to a college 3 hours from home. She was majoring in marketing. She was dating someone. Each piece of information was a small, sharp prick to the heart, but I held my ground. I couldn't force her to see the truth. I could only live my own and hope that if she ever became ready to hear my side, I would still be here. Her 18th birthday came and went without a word. I gave myself 1 day to grieve, looking through old photo albums and crying on Elena's shoulder. Then I got up and kept moving. By year 3, I realized something astonishing. I actually liked my life. I traveled to conferences in Chicago and Boston, cities I'd always wanted to see. I took a pottery class and was hilariously bad at it, but I loved the feel of the clay. I started keeping a journal, and reading back through my entries, I could see my own evolution from a broken woman questioning her sanity to someone who saw Adam's abuse. For the calculated campaign, it was one entry from year 4 stood out. Adam's cruelty was the best thing that ever happened to me. If he had just been neglectful or unhappy, I would have stayed forever, trying to fix it. But his calculated erasure was so absolute, so deliberate, that leaving was the only option. He freed me by trying to destroy me. I didn't miss my marriage. I missed the fantasy of what I thought my marriage was. The reality had been 20 years of making myself smaller. Adam hadn't suddenly become cruel. I had just been too invested in the fantasy to see it. Year 5 arrived without fanfare. I was 49 with modest savings, a job I loved, and friends who genuinely cared about me. My life wasn't flashy, but it was mine. That Tuesday evening in late April, I was heating up soup when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but some strange instinct made me answer. "Hello, Eleanor." It was Adam's voice. After 5 years of absolute silence, he was suddenly in my kitchen, a voice from a ghost life. My entire body tensed. My first impulse was to hang up, but a morbid curiosity won out. "I'm here," I managed, my hand gripping the counter. He sounded different, older, less certain. I wasn't sure if this was still your number." "It is." I gave him nothing more. There was an awkward silence. "How have you been?" The question was so outrageously absurd, I almost laughed. "Fine," I said flatly. "Why are you calling, Adam?" He took a deep breath, the kind people take before delivering bad news. "Eleanor, Chloe is getting married." The word struck me with physical force. My little girl, 23 years old, getting married to a man I'd never met. "Married," I repeated, my brain struggling to catch up. "Yes, to a wonderful young man, Mark Peterson. The wedding is next month." Next month, she had been engaged for who knows how long, and I was finding out from a phone call 5 weeks before the ceremony. I hope she's very happy." "She is, Eleanor." His voice changed, becoming hesitant. "You should come. To the wedding." I almost dropped the phone. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. "You want me at the wedding?" "Yes, she's your daughter. You should be there." But as he spoke, giving me the date and the venue, I heard something new in his voice, something I had never heard from him before. It sounded like fear. He was afraid of something. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it was there, a hairline crack in his polished facade. "She misses you," he said quietly. I did laugh then. A short, bitter sound. Funny way of showing it. 5 years, Adam. Not one call, not one text. But now she misses me. People change, Eleanor. "Yes," I agreed, "they certainly do." I should have said no. I should have told him exactly what he could do with his invitation. But instead, I heard myself say, "I'll think about it." After he hung up, I stood in my kitchen with a bowl of cold soup, trying to understand what had just happened. My daughter was getting married, and somehow, impossibly, I had just agreed to consider going. I stared at my phone long after the call ended, the screen dark, my soup forgotten. My daughter was getting married at the Riverside Country Club, and I'd said I'd think about it. The absurdity of it was staggering. I needed perspective. I sent a text to the Hearth Circle group chat. "Emergency meeting, my place, tomorrow, bring wine." The next evening, my small living room was filled with the women who had become my real family. I told them everything. "Why now?" Elena asked immediately, her teacher's mind always looking for the hidden motive. "What changed?" "Maybe Chloe insisted." I offered weakly. "Did Adam say that?" Joyce asked, already pouring wine. "Because in my world, people don't suddenly remember you exist unless they need something from you." "What do they want, Eleanor?" "Your compliance, Michelle," the nurse said quietly. "They want you to show up, play the part of the long-lost mother, and make everything look normal. They want to look gracious for allowing you back in." She leaned forward. "But here's the real question. What do you want, Eleanor? Not what a good mother should do. What do you actually want?" I set my glass down. "I want to see her," I admitted. "I want to know if she ever thinks about me." And, Joyce prompted. "And I want Adam to see me." The truth came out, sharp and hard. I want him to see the woman he tried to erase, rebuilt into someone he can't control. Elena smiled slowly. "Now we're talking." "It's not revenge," I said quickly. "It's closure," Michelle corrected. "And frankly, it's justice. He tried to destroy you. You showing up whole and thriving is the most powerful answer you could ever give." By the time they left, my decision was made. I was going. The next morning, I met my lawyer, Laura, at our usual coffee shop. "You're going," she stated before I could even speak, reading my face with unnerving accuracy. "I'm going." She ordered a black coffee. "Then we do this strategically. This is either a trap or an opportunity, or both. You go armored. Treat it like a deposition. Speak only when necessary. Observe everything. Give them nothing. No tears, no anger, no explanations. You are composed, dignified, and there because you choose to be, I can do that. Also," she added, "consider bringing a date, a friend, proof that you have a life they are not a part of. Men like Adam can't stand the idea that you survived without them. Showing him you flourished is more devastating than any planned revenge." I thought about it, then shook my head. No, I need to do this alone. Proving I don't need anyone to validate my existence is the whole point. For the next 3 weeks, I prepared for the wedding. Like it was a battle, I found the perfect dress. A simple, elegant navy blue sheath that said, "I'm doing well without screaming. I'm trying to impress you." I got my hair cut and styled. I practiced my responses in the mirror. "How have you been?" "I've been very well, thank you." "Neutral." "Where have you been?" "Building a life for myself." "And you?" "Turn it back." "Why did you leave?" "I left because I was being ignored. I chose to exist somewhere else." Truth without anger. The night before, I couldn't sleep. I looked at old photos of Chloe as a baby, a toddler, a girl with missing front teeth. I let myself feel the grief for the lost years. I cried for 20 minutes, then I put the photos away. Tomorrow wasn't about the past. It was about facing it with my dignity intact. The morning of the wedding was beautiful. I moved through my routine with robotic precision. Coffee, shower, makeup, the navy dress. I looked in the mirror and saw a woman who had survived. Good enough. The drive to the country club felt surreal. I parked my modest 10-year-old sedan at the far edge of the lot, away from the luxury cars, and watched the guests arrive. I didn't belong to this world anymore, but I had built something better, something real. I took a deep breath, opened the car door, and walked toward the entrance. Time to show them what they had lost. I slipped into the ceremony space and found a seat in the back row. The room was a fantasy of white roses and champagne-colored silk. I recognized no one. These were all people from Adam's post-Eleanor life. The string quartet began to play, and the procession started. And then there was Chloe. My breath caught in my chest. She was stunning, radiant on her father's arm. Adam looked exactly as he was supposed to, the proud, successful father of the bride. They started down the aisle, and the weight of 5 lost years hit me all at once. I had missed so much. Then Chloe's eyes met mine across the room. The shock on her face was visceral. Her step faltered. She whispered something urgently to Adam. He turned his head, his gaze sweeping the back rows until it landed on me. And that's when it happened. Adam's hands began to shake. Not a slight tremor, but a visible, violent shaking that he tried to conceal by gripping Chloe's arm tighter. His face went ashen under his perfect tan. His confident expression crumbled. He hadn't actually expected me to come. He'd invited me as a strategic move, assuming I'd refuse, allowing him to play the magnanimous victim. But here I was, present, composed, whole. And his carefully constructed world was tilting on its axis. They reached the altar. Adam released Chloe's arm, his hand still trembling as he took his seat. The ceremony began, but I wasn't watching my daughter get married. I was watching Adam. He kept glancing back at me, his composure disintegrating with each look. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated fear. He wasn't afraid of me. He was afraid of what I represented. The woman he'd tried to erase, who had refused to stay erased, the wife he'd driven away, who should have stayed broken. My very presence was a testament to his failure. And in that moment, I understood. The real power wasn't in staying and enduring. The real power was in walking away and rebuilding yourself so completely that your existence becomes an undeniable truth. The ceremony ended. I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Mark Peterson. As guests applauded, Chloe's eyes found mine again. This time the look was different. Confusion, maybe shame, maybe anger. I gave her a single small nod. I see you. I came. I am still your mother. As people moved toward the reception, I quietly walked in the opposite direction I had done what I came to do. I had been present, visible, undeniable. That was enough. I pushed open the doors into the bright afternoon sun, and as I walked across the parking lot, I felt a profound lightness. The shame, the guilt, the questions I'd carried for 5 years, they were all lifting. I hadn't failed. I had survived. I was unlocking my car when I heard his voice. "Eleanor, wait." It was Adam, breathless and urgent. His composure was shattered. "You came," he said, as if it were a miracle. "You invited me," I replied, my voice calm. "I didn't think you actually would," he admitted. "After everything." "After everything." "You did, you mean?" I asked, my tone purely factual. He flinched. "After you systematically erased me? Poisoned my daughter against me? Stole our money and tried to destroy my career with lies? Which everything are we talking about, Adam?" His face went white. It wasn't supposed to. It got out of hand. I almost laughed. "No, Adam. It didn't get out of hand. You planned it. Every single step. It was calculated destruction." "Eleanor, I held up a hand, cutting him off. "I don't need an explanation. I don't need an apology. I came today because Chloe is my daughter. But I don't belong here anymore." I met his eyes directly. "And honestly, I'm grateful. You showed me exactly what I was worth to you. And that forced me to realize I was worth so much more to myself." I got in my car, leaving him standing there, speechless. As I drove away, I didn't look back. The drive home was different. The world seemed brighter. I thought about Chloe. Maybe one day she would want the real story, but I released the need for it to happen now. You can't force someone to see the truth. You can only live your own so authentically that the door is open if they ever choose to walk through it. Back in my small, perfect apartment, I changed into comfortable clothes and ordered my favorite Thai food. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Why did you come today?" It was Chloe, not, "Thank you for coming," not, "Can we talk?" Just an accusation I typed and deleted several replies. Finally, I settled on the simple truth. "Because you're still my daughter, even if you've forgotten I'm still your mother. When you're ready to talk honestly without your father coaching you, I'll be here." I hesitated, then added, "I love you, Chloe. Always have. Nothing changes that." I sent the message and then turned my phone off. The rest was up to her. As I ate my dinner, watching a documentary about whales, I had a sudden realization I'd gotten my revenge. Not a dramatic, fiery revenge, but something quieter and more profound. Revenge was Adam's shaking hands. It was my ability to walk away from that wedding needing nothing from them. It was the complete, contented life I had built from the rubble. The best revenge wasn't making them hurt. The best revenge was becoming so whole without them that their regret, if it ever came, was just background noise I no longer needed to hear. 5 years ago, I thought I had lost everything, but I hadn't lost anything. I had shed a skin that was suffocating me, and what I had gained was infinitely more precious. Myself, not the diminished wife or the convenient mother, just Eleanor, flawed, real, and finally completely free. If this story of quiet strength and walking away had you captivated, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Eleanor sat calmly in the back row while Adam's hands began to shake, realizing she'd survived everything he tried to destroy. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more powerful stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. End of story.